Good afternoon, everyone. This is Damon Lester, president of NAMAD. Hope everyone is having a great and safe Tuesday. Today, as a part of our NAMAD Convention Workshop Series, we have a special guest from Mannheim Digital. And today we will discuss digital wholesale, successful buying and selling in the time of COVID-19. This will be facilitated by Mr. Zach Hallowell, who's the VP of Mannheim Digital. As some housekeeping notes, please make sure that you hold all questions till the end of his presentation, and we will answer them accordingly. The floor is yours, Zach. Thank you.
Great, thanks Damon, and thanks to the entire team at NAMAD for inviting me to talk with you today and share some insights on digital buying and selling in the time of COVID-19. Clearly a lot's changed over the past few months, and virtually overnight, our physical auctions were completely closed, along with dealerships and many other businesses. At our 76 locations, we were no longer able to do business as we normally did, and we had to make some pretty significant changes to really lean in to our digital channels, and we all really had to find a way of doing business differently. The good news is that the wholesale industry has been working towards this for some time, really for the past few decades, and that preparation made it possible for us all to continue to do business despite the restrictions that were in place as a result of the coronavirus. In effect, really what happened was that the coronavirus accelerated some trends that we were already seeing in place before the crisis began. And really we're on tap to change the way that the wholesale landscape worked. So I'm going to start with some of the trends that we've seen both before and during the pandemic. I wish I could say after the pandemic, but unfortunately the end is not yet clear. And I think we all expect that it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride as we work our way through this over the next few months. So to jump in, I'm going to cover some data from before the pandemic to look at how our dealers were considering digital channels and interacting with them, prior to this real change event that has driven so much newness to the way that we do business. So we'll take a look at some key data. So the first thing that I'll call out is this natural growth that we had seen in the use of our digital channels. But about 20 years ago, Mannheim introduced simulcast as a way to buy cars, and it was really at the forefront of this change. But what we've seen in the past few years is that there's been this steady sort of 4 to 5% change each year in the growth of digital channels. So you can see in 2017, about 39% of our sales were to digital buyers, and that includes simulcast and some of our other digital channels, whether they be our mobile apps or through channels like Mannheim.com and OVE. And over time, we've added 4 to 5%. So from 39% in 2017 to 52% prior to COVID in week 13 of this year. So we were seeing that growth really grow and actually accelerate a little bit. We also saw it across other aspects of our digital platforms. So the total numbers of users that were interacting was also growing. So it wasn't just the number of cars, and it wasn't that there were certain dealers that were comfortable with digital and started buying more, but more dealers were buying using our digital channels. So we went from about a little over 100,000 back in 2012 to over 150,000 unique dealers that buy from us today across our digital channels. And we're also seeing usage increase in other digital tools. So if you look at our MMR mobile app, where the dealers use to scan to get values of cars, and that might be at the point of trade-in or while evaluating wholesale units, we've seen a significant increase. So really in just a year, from 2018 to 2019, for example, we saw an increase of about 3 million scans using those tools. So overall, we saw some significant trends towards digital buying, and that's not that surprising, right? In our world, all of us are buying more digitally. We're buying from Amazon more and more. We're buying groceries and having them delivered to our house. So those trends were already in place, but I think we can all say that the COVID crisis really accelerated many of those areas. But first, let's look at what dealers think of buying digitally. So when we look at this, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients and surveying them to know what's on their minds. You know, as I mentioned, we have 150,000 dealers that interact with us, so there are lots of different points of view and opinions out there. But the general message is that overall dealers were becoming pretty comfortable with buying digitally. Not all, but many. About 80% of dealers had been doing some pre-sale research, at least digitally. So what that means is they weren't necessarily buying the car through a digital channel, but they might have been previewing cars that they would later buy at auction. They were becoming more comfortable doing that. But they had not all started buying prior to the COVID crisis online. Many of them previewed, but would go to the auction to actually buy cars. And what we've seen, is that overall comfort level has played itself into the COVID crisis. 3/4 said that they were prepared. The digital tools help make it easier to prepare for the auction and enhance their work. It made them more efficient. And 2/3 said that digital tools have a positive impact. And most dealers overall, about 30%, or most dealers expect that digital buying and selling will increase about 30% in the next year. And again, that was pre-COVID, and I think clearly we've seen that that increase far exceeded 30%. And we'll get into the details there in just a second. The other thing to note is that, as I mentioned earlier, dealers in their normal life were also moving more digital. About 94% of dealers. Yep.
Zach, your slides aren't moving, so I don't know if you're advancing your slides.
Okay, I thank you for the heads up on that. I am advancing them. I see it shows paused there. I'm not sure. Let me see there. Oops. It is not allowing me to unpause it, Damon.
Uh-oh, let's see.
Let me try. When I hit play, or shit, let me try this. There we go. How's that?
Yep, got it. We're good.
Great. It's just I had to unshow and show again. So the wonders of technology. Right? Presentations have also gone more digital since COVID-19, I guess. So I guess just to rewind everyone to this slide, as I noted, 80% of dealers prior to COVID-19 were doing at least pre-sale research digitally, and 3/4 of them, most of them felt like digital tools were enhancing their work, and 2/3 overall thought that digital tools have had a positive impact. So the general sentiment was that dealers felt comfortable with digital, but it wasn't really mandatory, right? They could choose to use it or not to choose it. But at the same time, in their real lives, their normal lives, they were also moving more digitally. 94% say that they shop digitally in their real life. 71% have an Amazon Prime account. So they're, all of you there, I'm sure you think about what you do every day. Increasingly, it involves buying things online. So as we look to what the world looks like in the midst of the COVID crisis, things have changed a little bit. Now digital is the only channel to buy through. But over 60%, 6 in 10 dealers tell us that simulcast has been working for them as a replacement for physical lane buying. And more than 1/3 actually feel pretty positive about it. And that's actually a pretty strong number. When we look at the normal adoption curves for introducing new things, it takes a while for people to adjust to new changes. So I think we made this transition pretty successfully. 36% of simulcast buyers since March 16th have bought on simulcast for the first time ever in their lives. So this is, pretty significant shift. So those dealers that had been buying in the lane had to make a pretty big shift to get comfortable with buying through simulcast. And by and large, they're pretty happy with it. In the lower left, we also see a significant increase in our remote selling tools, with average weekly simulcast remote seller usage up by about 1/3. What that means is that our sellers are using that tool more and more to represent their vehicles. Really, it is, it's the only way to represent vehicles, has been for the past few months, although we're starting to let sellers onto the block at our auctions. I know many other auctions are doing the same. but we expect that that's going to continue. And we've been able to make that transition pretty seamlessly. Sellers have been really happy that they've been able to continue to do their job. Without it, there would really be no other option for selling cars. An average weekly simulcast bidding, if you look at the lower right, is up 54% compared to pre-COVID levels. So the buying audience has definitely moved online and the sellers are engaging. So that's been key to allowing us to get business done. We know that there is another side though. Some dealers are having a tough time. These are dealers that are more frequently smaller independents who were less experienced or had no experience at all with simulcast at the time that the physical auction shut down. And they also have tended to buy lower value inventory, which tends to raise more questions maybe about the condition of the vehicle. Although ironically, lower value inventory, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, has been actually a hot segment. So those dealers that were comfortable and were able to buy some lower dollar cars in digital channels have actually been able to make significant profit during this time period because there's been such demand at that segment of the market. And not surprisingly, we have commentary kind of all over the board. And so that dealership point of view is absolutely impacted by the emotions that they're feeling every day related to their business. In the early stages, there was a lot of doubt and concern. And what we're seeing right now is really a reflection of the resilience of dealers, where they're getting back to business and they're adapting and adjusting to meet the retail demand, which is surprisingly strong throughout the country. One in terms of sentiment, there's this quote that really jumped out at me from one of our surveys that I think really reflects the journey that dealers have been on through this crisis and with this transition to digital. So what this dealer said is, the system's really easy and I really enjoy it. I'll be honest, I was one of the biggest skeptics against it because I really hadn't tried it and I couldn't get over the idea of bidding online. But since I've done it the last few weeks, I do like it. The more I use it, the more I like it. I like the fact that I don't have to go to the auction. I like the fact that I can stay in my office and tend to my customers, tend to my day-to-day operations. I like the fact that I don't have to worry about getting out infecting anybody or getting myself sick. And now that we can go a day in advance and kind of peek at the auction, I like everything about it. So, what I think is captured here is that full range of emotions, the initial resistance because it was different, they hadn't tried it, to this ultimate, not just acceptance, but really appreciation for what digital channels allowed this dealer to do. And I think in particular in the coronavirus pandemic, with the financial challenges that it has brought on, we're all having to work with fewer people. And so that means we have to be super efficient about what we do every day. And I think what this dealer found is that they're able to do more from their dealership, attending to all the things that they need to do, their retail business, valuing trades, all of that, and get the wholesale business done without having to leave their office, which has been critical. And in some cases, we know, travel hasn't been that easy. So this has served as a real outlet for them for doing business. So the message overall, I think, is one of hope, that despite the changes, the car business can get through this crisis. And in fact, we're starting to see some more positive trends. So in the past few weeks, what we've seen is that sales through our digital platforms have grown about 50% since the switch to all digital. So we are really rapidly catching up to where our normal business would be with lane sales, which is really encouraging, I think, for the overall industry. One thing I'll notice that we didn't ever shut down. You may be aware of that. We really made a decision that we wanted to do everything we could to keep ourselves open, even though it was only our digital channels that remained open, to provide liquidity in the marketplace, to provide a place that dealers could go to, to turn cars into cash, to keep their business afloat, to keep things running. So, we're encouraged that, we're starting to really get back to normal levels, even though they're not through our normal channel. We also hit 1 million cars sold through our digital channels about a month earlier this year than last year as a result of this switchover. So, our tools were there and they have performed through this period. And when I look at one of our digital channels that is sort of our most pure digital channel, OVE, which is a 24/7 bid buy kind of auction, our sales are actually up 35% year over year. And what that really shows is that dealers are adjusting to and adapting to our digital channels and keeping their business moving. So While we know that there are dealers that are still experiencing some challenges, I think we're beginning to get back to, what is likely a new normal, that is more digitally centric. And I'll talk about that more in the latter part of the presentation. But right now I want to shift over to focus on, some of the things that are unique to the buying of vehicles in digital channels and considerations that you want to take into account as you make that move or lean in even more heavily on that digital buying. And then I'll cover selling, and then we'll wrap things up. So looking at smart buying in the digital marketplace, I'm going to talk about some of the tactics that can make a difference. But first, let's get grounded in some of the things I was just talking about, which is the channels that exist in the digital world. And of course, they're most familiar to me. The Manheim channels is what I'll talk about here, but there are other examples across the industry through independent auctions and other companies that have similar channels in general. So the first is simulcast, which is our sequential one-by-one live bidding event. So we have lots of dealers logged into the event, and each car is presented one by one to be bid upon. And generally, those are held, once a week in conjunction with physical auction run dates and oriented around all the cars being at one location. Although even that's changing a little bit in this, where we're increasingly combining cars from multiple locations in a simulcast event. It's a great way to really get a feel for what the market is, and also to establish sort of price, what a car is worth, maybe that there isn't a lot of supply of it in the market, because you have that concentration of bidders and buyers in one place, or buyers and sellers in one place. It's a great way to buy, a bunch of vehicles in one place and have a truckload delivered to your lot. The logistics of buying through simulcast is straightforward. You can buy PSIs, post-sale inspections through simulcast sales as well. So then we have dealer consignment apps, and this is, one of the newer ways of buying in this space. This is a more mobile-friendly approach, and generally it's vehicles that are located off-site. So cars that are maybe on a dealer's front line that they're thinking about wholesaling. Manheim Express is our entry in that field. Makes it really easy to sell and buy a car from wherever it sits or you sit. So we hear stories of dealers buying cars from their lawnmower or from the grocery store using their mobile devices. And then we have what we refer to as kind of our 24/7 online marketplaces. So that's Manheim.com, OVE, and of course there are others out there. ADESA has their own. And those marketplaces really are the access point for, in a way, both the cars I talked about in the two previous channels, but other cars that are sitting at various locations. And one of the key distinctions is that these cars, many of them have a buy now price. So you can click on the car and you own it immediately without any of the bidding involved. And it's a good way to sort of identify specific cars that either fill a hole in your inventory, or if you have a customer who's looking for a specific car that you might not have in your inventory, you can kind of use this as your virtual back lot. You can source the car immediately. You kind of can really lock in your margin at that point because you have a willing buyer, and you can source the car. And then it's just a matter of getting the car delivered to your location and fulfilling the final parts of the deal. So, three slightly different channels through which you can buy cars, all of which have a different focus in different segments. So now that we've covered the channels, let's talk about how to use them for your sourcing. So one of the most important factors in buying, whether digital or physical, is really understanding the current market. So, it's important to understand, how to buy right is what it comes down to. So there are a few things to make note of in buying in digital channels in the coronavirus cycle. The biggest one is that while wholesale prices are still down, they have rebounded from the bottom, but they're still down below the pre-COVID levels. Retail prices, interestingly, have not been as affected. So we really think that there is still opportunity out there. One of the virtues that we have at Cox is that we have access to wholesale data through Manheim, all our transactions there, as well as retail data through the likes of AutoTrader, or through vAuto. And so we can see that there's actually the gap between wholesale and retail has been as great as it has been in years during this crisis. So there have been opportunities for profit. the question is, how do you find it? And so I think you look at MMR as part of a guide, and then look at the various retail guidebooks and look at that gap. What we have seen though is that MMR has started to recover and is closer to a reflection of the market average, but it is by design meant to be a bit of a lagging indicator and not be too overly reactive to ups and downs in the market. So right now, and we publish this on the site every day, we are transacting cars at a little over MMR, about 103% of MMR. So you can actually buy a little high on MMR and still have room for profit, which, in normal times, people really try to stay to the MMR averages. Right now, given that MMR is still catching up as the market has rebounded, you can actually buy a little bit above MMR pretty safely. During the downturn, it was opposite, is that you had to actually if you bought to MMR, you may actually have been buying above the market. And that's why we got out there with a daily publication that shows where the market is in relation to the MMR values. And then the last point that I think is really key is that the idea of dollar cost averaging working in your favor. What that means is that during a down cycle, keeping inventory moving, keeping your cash flow fresh, so that you have the capital to buy into those depressed values, so that as things normalize and stabilize, you have that profit opportunity for you. I think there's always a risk in sort of freezing in that moment and not making any motions, and it can be a pretty risky proposition in the auto business to hold and hope that values increase. That is risky, and so one way to avoid that is, as Dale Pollock has long preached, is by driving velocity in your inventory, by keeping that turn going, so your inventory value is never very far away from your current transactions. So let's look at some other factors of buying in a digital environment. One of the biggest challenges that dealers have is understanding the condition of the vehicle, and we put a lot of emphasis on condition reports. There's a lot of innovation, frankly, happening in the industry as well. And while some auction lots have opened for dealers to preview in advance, a lot haven't, and the cars are also so stacked in that it can be sometimes hard to get to them. So the online condition report becomes very important. So one thing we would recommend first and foremost, as you see in the upper left here, is looking at the full condition report, making sure you go through each line item of the damage, take a look at the pictures, do the same assessment as you would be physically standing in front of the car. And just below that, images. Images are a key component of that. And that's an area where we're beginning to invest even more heavily to increase the number of images for all of our customer cars. But look at every picture. Don't just look at the center of the picture either, which is sort of a natural thing to do. Look around the edges. Look at the dashboard, the interior pictures, the fabric and all the seat. The idea, the goal is that you don't have any surprises. And what we found is that when we poll our dealers, one of the biggest criticisms is condition reports. But really, when we peel back that onion, one of the biggest criticisms is not having enough images. So we're actively making some investments in that area, and I think you'll see improvements across the board. Another area to really focus on is on vehicle history reports. Make sure you're taking a look at the auto check report. We make that available on our sites, as well as a summary of that report, but also Carfax. It's what your retail customers, who are increasingly well informed, they're going to be looking at that and making a determination of whether or not they want to buy the car. That does vary, of course, by segment of cars. On some lower end cars, that's less important. Customers don't have the luxury of choice necessarily lower down in the price spectrum. And so the previous history of the car may be less important. But as you get higher and higher in value, of course, that history report becomes more and more important. The other thing that's super important is the grade of the car. And that really relates to the valuation guide as well. So those two have an interplay. Of course, the rougher a car is, you don't want to just buy on the average price. You want a condition adjusted price, because different cars are impacted differently by their condition. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the grade of the car and looking at the price in relation to the grade to buy. Right, that's pretty basics. It's basic in the physical world. Online, one of the key differences is that a lot of dealers search by auto grade. So getting from a 3.9 to a 4.0 can change the visibility of the car. So if you're selling the car, making sure that you've done a little bit of light reconditioning to help sort of maximize the grade is a key way of having success in the wholesale space. And then one of the most innovative things that has been introduced into the industry recently is engine noise. So now you can view, in particular on dealer cars offsite, a running video of the engine of the car, which can tell you so much. You can hear if there's lifter noise, you can hear if it's running smoothly or rough, or if it's idling evenly. So the engine noise is really, in a way, a game changer when considering buying cars offsite. And we recommend that you, wherever available, you listen to the engine, take the time to do that. The end goal is that as a buyer, there are no surprises. You're buying the car you expected to get, and of course, there are protections available if you ever receive a car where something didn't add up. So as I close up the buyer side, I wanted to talk a little bit about some success stories that I've heard in the industry during this time period. So on the buy side, I think of a dealer that I spoke to in Florida who's made a transition of buying more in our 24/7 marketplace on OVE. He used OVE during this time period to lower his inventory levels so that he has more cash available. It's not tied up in floor plan fees or anything like that. But he's been able to serve his retail customers by using OVE as that virtual backlot I mentioned earlier. So he's able to pinpoint the exact cars that they want, source them, have them delivered without taking significant inventory risk. He's not turning as many cars, but his risk profile is lowered. And then as he's seen success there, he's been able to take some steps to buy more cars via some other digital channels as well. So it's been a great way for him to keep cars moving, even when, frankly, he couldn't, move as easily himself. So it's just a good example of how getting familiar with and comfortable with a digital channels kind of allowed business to keep moving in these kind of tumultuous times. So now that we've covered the buy side, I will switch over to some successful selling strategies. And again, I'll just touch base on sort of the different channels, but in this case, I think the important dynamic for selling is that first decision of selling on-site versus off-site. So are you going to sell the car from your lot, or are you going to take the car to auction and sell the car from there? So, just as on the buy side, there are choices, on the sell side, there are choices as well. So if you're going to sell on-site, and by that I mean from auctions, simulcast really, is an optimal choice. If you do that, we recommend you bring the car to the auction at least a day in advance, so as a chance to get up and online and available for preview. It's one of the quickest ways to cash because the whole transaction takes place through the auction in that day, in that moment. So if you need to turn cars quickly into cash, bringing a car in to be listed on simulcast is a great way to do that. If you bring a car in early, a week early, say, one option is to put the car up on a channel like an OVE. And again, these are, I'm using the Manheim channels, but they're consistent across the industry. You can make the vehicle available on manheim.com and OVE in advance of the auction and really opportunistically sell that car until that sale event. So if you get a price that you're comfortable with before that sale event, you've decreased your turn time and made the car move a little bit more quickly. If you're thinking about selling cars offsite, and that is often the right approach for a fresh trade and for aged units that you may be thinking about, wholesaling, but aren't ready to commit to bring it to the auction yet. Something like, an offsite sale through Manheim Express or through OVE with a third-party inspector is a great way to go. So in that case, you can keep the car on your lot. You can have it advertised for retail while you're also exposing it to a wholesale audience. So it's a really flexible way. So depending on the type of inventory, something like a fresh trade, an aged unit, or a unit that is getting up in age, let's say, that offsite solution may be the way to go. But when you need to turn the car into cash quickly, bringing the car to auction, selling it through a simulcast sale can be a very effective strategy. So I'll go a little bit deeper into some key dynamics around offsite and onsite selling in the next few slides as well. One of the big drivers of success in either case, and there's a special consideration maybe for on-site selling that I'll cover here, is a condition report. Condition reports are key drivers of success online. So when you're thinking about on-site selling, some dealers choose not to do condition reports, but the data we see is that you are 5 times, you get 5 times more bids on a vehicle if you have a condition report. It's all about trust. It helps the buyer become more comfortable with what they're buying. They can see that the seller has done their homework, so made the investment to represent that vehicle accurately. And those cars get 5 times more bids, and at a $100 bid increment, that's $500 more on average per car if you have a condition report. Condition reports, cost on order of $35. So I'd invest $35 to get $500 more just about any day. Also, units with condition reports get 3 times more transactions, so the car is more likely to sell if it has a condition report as well. So it sells at a higher rate and with more bids, and that ultimately means more money. They attract more interest. They get about 10 more vehicle detail page views on average than cars without condition reports. And sold units have fewer arbitrations, 3 times fewer arbitrations. So it's a smart investment to have a condition report done on the car. It does involve bringing the car in a little bit earlier so the auction has time to complete that condition report, but the return that you see is inarguable. They're definitely drivers of better performance when you're selling a car on site. When you go off site, there's a similar dynamic, but there's some more choices to make. So the big choice is whether or not to do a condition report yourself or to have it done by a third party. We refer to those as concierges in our Manheim Express program. So if you have capacity, you might have a lot person who has some time and want to use them more effectively. They can do a sufficient self-serve inspection. The tools out there are really easy to use, kind of workflow driven applications that allow you to take consistent pictures and answer simple yes/no questions on the car. So that absolutely can be done. If you don't have the capacity, you can have a concierge do it. There's a bit of a fee associated with it, but that's generally tied in with the sale fee of the vehicle. So you only pay if the car sells. By having a third party do it, in our case, what we are able to do is assign an auto grade to that car. So we can grade a concierge inspected car, whereas we don't on self-service cars. And the reason for that is, just the variability in the person performing the inspection. We can feel confident because of the training that we have done around a concierge to add a grade. So you can make those choices. If you're more cost conscious right now, self-serve may be the way to go. We're actually, through the end of this month, we waive the fees on self-serve, and again, that's consistent with a lot of other players in the industry right now. Or you can have someone come to your lot, might be on regular milk runs, every week, the same days, and do an inspection of all your inventory.
Yeah.
So is there a question there?
Gotcha.
I think I'll go ahead, but if everyone maybe put themselves on mute.
What's your availability?
Oops. I will press forward, but Damon, I don't know if you're able to mute.
All right. Let me just take a quick
lines.
look, but I think that should be fine.
The other side of selling is engaging the auction.
Tuesday, the 17th.
So one of the most important things here is the same as if you're in a physical lane.
Sure.
Being an engaged seller who adjusts.
Your name is John Fitzgerald?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, super.
I apologize for the background. Let's see if we can.
Thank you for asking. Yes, 1960. Yeah, and if for some reason it's not working, so anyway, I'll be watching for you, but just call. This is my cell, so you can always just give me a buzz.
Damon, I don't know if you can.
I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you, sir.
I will press forward. So engaging an auction as a seller. So whether it's on simulcast or in some of the other channels, it's so important as a seller to be engaged in what you're buying. A lot of times, historically, sellers have just put cars up online and taken a sort of set and forget mentality where they put the car up at a premium price and just hope that they'll sell. And I would say that is not a good strategy to take. Your reputation online matters in the same way as it does in your lane, and your buyers will figure out whether you're a seller who's serious about getting engaged. So there are a couple of things you can do. On simulcast, you can seller to monitor your runs, to adjust prices, adjust floors, pay attention to how many bidders there are, do the same things you do if you were standing on the block representing your cars. And all those tools are available digitally, so you can perform exactly the same functions and be as engaged as you would be if you were on, standing there physically. On channels like OVE or Manheim Express, one of the things we highly recommend is paying attention to the number of views on your cars. So we show you how many looks there have been on cars, and if there's more than 10 or so looks and there's no bids, we highly recommend reviewing the pricing of the vehicle, because let's remember, right, these are not casual lookers out there. These are professional used car buyers who are trying to buy online. And so if they've looked at a car, they have some serious intent there. And if they're not buying, it's likely that the price feels out of line with the market. So we highly recommend paying attention to those cars, using the tools that are available, and adjusting prices based upon the market. This is not a completely automated way of selling cars. You have to make the same decisions as you do as if you were selling the cars physically. So as I begin to wrap things up, I wanted to share some stories that I've heard from sellers during this period as well. The first is from a wholesaler that I've known for a little while in the Atlanta area. He carries about 900 cars in stock in a normal time, so he's got a pretty heavy inventory load. And when coronavirus hit and we saw the prices declining, he obviously was concerned, and he had a big decision to make. Does he keep selling cars and keeping his business capitalized, despite the fact that there's the likelihood of some losses, or should he hold? In his case, he used digital channels and relied on simulcast to keep selling cars. He was a skeptic. He typically runs his cars through the lanes and stands up there and represents them. But he made the shift to digital tools. And initially, he did have some losses, but he used that capital and turned it around and was able to buy into the market as well. And with the bounce of prices and values, he's been able to do a couple things. One, he has lightened his inventory load, so he's got more cash in the bank during this time period just to be prepared. And two, he has also reaped the benefits of some of the changes in the market dynamics. So he's been able to buy some cheaper cars and then sell them as the money from the government become available and help drive increasing action in the market. And he was able to adjust and keep his business going at a very uncertain time. On a slightly different, there was an independent dealer in Manheim, Pennsylvania, who was a longtime digital adopter and has a really good reputation in OVE. So even when he had to shut down his retail business almost completely, he was able to keep his wholesale business moving through OVE. He had established a good reputation. He does really solid condition reports, and that investment paid off. He was able to keep vehicles moving in the wholesale environment, even when, for all intents and purposes, other sides of his business really had to shut down. So as I kind of come to the end, we get a lot of questions about what changes we see on the horizon. What's going to stick? What's going to change? What is only temporary? What is the world going to look like as we come through this crisis and move into the future? What is the new normal? I think is the question that probably gets asked of us even more than anything else. So I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what's ahead and what we believe the trends are that will stick. So the first thing is that, we think wholesale will remain heavily digital for the foreseeable future. There are lots of reasons for that. One is we've just seen increased adoption. We've introduced a whole new segment of buyers to digital channels, and some dealers are going to choose to work that way. All of us are working with fewer resources, and as a result, we need to think about how to do business more and more efficiently. So we're pretty certain that buying and selling digitally is going to remain at higher levels than it would have otherwise naturally been. The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, we are going all in on imaging. We think in this world that the pictures of the cars are going to be critical to driving trust online. So we are making significant investments in that area, as are others in the industry. So pictures are going to be so important, and I'm sure that you all have seen on the retail side of your business a similar dynamic. You know, customers are expecting pictures of everything. They want the complete view of the car, and the same holds true on the wholesale side as well. If you take a look at what we're doing in Manheim, New England, and Manheim, Dallas, it's good examples of some of the increases. So we're doubling our picture count in those two locations as a pilot for potentially rolling that out more nationally. And we've also been investing in technologies that'll make this whole process a little easier for everyone. So Lot Vision, as an example, is a tool that we have rolled out to a number of locations, and are rapidly rolling out to all of our locations, that will allow you to locate cars on auction lots more easily. You know, cars may not be parked the same way that they were pre-COVID in this new world, and so we need for you to find the cars, and we're going to rely on like Lot Vision, so you can easily follow a map to where the car is located.
So you're all done?
In a few feet of where the car is parked. And then finally, we're continuing to evaluate safety, and we are going to open up more of our lots for access and previewing, and in some cases, in-lane bidding. Cars may not run, but dealers may be able to bid. But that is all to make sure our TEP safe, that are safe, and that we follow state and local guidelines with regard to maintaining social distance and all that stuff. So with all that said, I'll wrap things up. To all of you for
Oh, I see. That's what I couldn't do. Oh, got you.
resilient and persevering through some pretty challenging times.
Yeah. No, they need to be enough.
For all of us.
Sure, that coffee cake.
Always value your feedback and appreciate it. If you have any questions, open to taking them now, or for you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or in any of the channels. We'd love to hear from you and understand more about your business and your challenges as we all work through this together. So thank you. Damon, I'm open to questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Zach. Please use your question feature or chat if you have any questions for Zach. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
Great. Like I said, Damon, if anyone has questions, you can always route them to me after the fact as well, if anything comes up. Will
do. And Zach, Julie, Ernest, and Cox Automotive, Manheim, thank you all for taking the time and doing the webinar with us today. Please, if you have any questions, you can email me. We will have this recording and a copy of the deck sent out later today or first thing tomorrow. Again, everyone have a great enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. Take care, guys.